Hi everyone, and welcome to the PatternFly demo for October 16th, 2018. I pasted the agenda in the chat. We have a few items to go through, so let's go ahead and get started. We first have interaction design, and Matt is up first. Is Matt with us? Okay. We'll start with Stacy then.
Okay. It's all in the same vein, so
okay.
I'll share my screen. And this is just kind of walking through, we're working on documentation for PatternFly 4 components. And the documentation that we're working on is really focusing on usage, when and why would I use the different elements or components that are being offered. So this is the navigation system. Obviously, it's still in a Google Doc. I have to put it in an MD file and get a pull request set up, but this is just kind of to show the progress. So you've got essentially vertical navigation and a bunch of different variations of vertical navigation. And the docs really just focus mostly on what these different types of nav look like, but then also why would I pick one over another? So that's really, I think, the meat of this documentation. And then horizontal nav, why would I pick horizontal over vertical? And then we also have tertiary navigation. What does that look like? When would I use that? And then also kind of walking through when and why you would use a context selector and how it fits in with the different options. So I'll be setting up a PR to put this into the PatternFly 4 design documentation. And I think that that's all that I have for nav system.
Okay, great. And Matt, are you here?
Yep, I just arrived, so I can do my thing. Let me share out. So I've been working on design documentation for alerts and notifications. The goal here was to try to have one design guidelines doc that addressed everything that you need to know about using alerts, notification, and the notification drawer in one place. So this covers a lot of ground. Basically, I split this up into talking about synchronous notifications, meaning notifications that result in a specific user action, and asynchronous notifications, which are notifications that are generated by the system, which not in response to a specific user action. So synchronous notifications are really what we've called in PatternFly 3 inline notifications. Those are things that may come up as a result of, say, form validation when the user clicks the submit button. So talking a little bit about the usage of inline notifications, when to use, when not to use, alternative solutions. Asynchronous notifications, which those are primarily exposed to the user through either toast notifications and or the notification drawer. So talking a little bit about toast notifications, usage of toast notifications. Have been having a lot of conversations back and forth with Jen Giordino about making sure our alerts and notifications are accessible. So again, when to use, when not to use, how to use toast notifications, what happens if you have multiple toast notifications, how should they stack? For example, how should they overflow? So we're basically saying if you have more than 3 toast notifications, you should get an overflow message. There are 10 more. There are 10 more unread notifications. Open the notification drawer to see them, because we know for our products, there's a lot of cases where the back end may spew a whole bunch of notifications at once, and we wouldn't want to have like 20 or 30 notifications being trying to displayed at once. And then the notification drawer. I created some updated wireframes for a notification drawer. In the case of the alerts and the toasts, those have been actually implemented already in the PatternFly Next repo. Notification drawer is still something to be worked on in the future. I haven't made drastic changes from PatternFly 3. However, I have tried to simplify and clarify some things a little bit in terms of what does it mean to clear a notification? What does it mean to mark it as read? So this documentation reviews that, talks about either the simple version of the drawer or the complex version of the drawer where we can use an accordion to group notifications into categories. Again, when to use, when not to use, how to use the notification drawer. There's still a little bit of work to be done here on creating some content guidelines on writing notifications. With PatternFly 4, we want to provide a lot more guidance, not just on the interactions, but about the content and about what it means to write good messages, good notifications here. So that will be added. So the link is in the agenda. I certainly welcome anybody to take a look at this Google Doc and feel free to comment or talk to me directly offline. Anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, I'll hand it back to you, Amy.
All right, thanks, Matt, for sharing. And next up is Rachel.
Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to show you my progress on Progress Bar, showing progress on Progress Bar. I've shown you how this has been developing. So what I want to focus on today is showing the schematic graphics that we've created here, and we hope that other designers will adopt across other designs and within building out the documentation, the design documentation specifically for components. So as you can see here, we've got, and this is reflected in some other components we're starting to build out as well, some dark gray and light gray elements. And what I'll show you specifically in Progress Bar is you can see that I am still highlighting things within the Progress Bar as color to really point out where that component lives. And then to show you a little bit about how this exists in context it is a little bit less descriptive than anything more high fidelity. But really when you're starting to show placement of different components, something like this where I'm showing Progress Bar in table is something we can kind of start incorporating in our different components design documentation. So again, these are just examples of where Progress Bar would live in context. So really showing that placement within these low fidelity wireframes versus this one would be dashboard. And this one would be file downloading. So again, 3 very different, or really 4, because this one's wizard. 4 very different ways of rendering Progress Bar and showing how it exists within a layout, but then really showing it at the low fidelity level. And to show you a little bit about how this exists in contrast with a more high fidelity component, a high fidelity view of the component, whereas you could show the low fidelity view in context as where to place that component. When you start talking about styling or other topics that are really pertinent to that high fidelity view, you can see here in styling, I've started to pull in that Progress Bar as it would exist in your high fidelity design work. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about this, and our approach towards schematic graphics is still developing, but I did want to share how I was incorporating it in my Progress Bar work. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Rachel. And next we're going to go over to visuals, and Michael is up next.
Yep. So this will be a quick one, but initially we were planning on doing browser defaults for focus states. And unfortunately, we ran into some problems where our CSS was overriding that default style. So we had to come up with a custom one, which is something I think we're planning on doing eventually, but we just decided to do it a little bit earlier than we thought. So here's what it looks like. The focus state, I guess the idea behind the focus state is to have a universal focus state. So sometimes with the browser defaults, you'll see different focus states for different components. But we wanted to have one that worked for everything, just for a more consistent experience. So basically what that looks like is a transparent blue box behind the component with 8 pixels of padding on each side. And as far as the style goes, this is kind of a similar style to some of the browser defaults. So we wanted to keep it familiar for the user, but we also wanted to make it work well also. So one thing you don't see a lot with focus states is meeting contrast standards for accessibility. And since this is a state that almost purely exists within accessible use cases, you know, really the only time this will ever appear is when kind of an accessibility-based use case. So we figured we might as well make it meet contrast standards as well, even though there's not very clearly defined requirements for that in the accessibility guidelines. So that's why we decided to add this 1 pixel blue outline. You know, it's basically an accessibility-based state. So we wanted to make it, we'd rather have it be more accessible than less accessible. And another kind of bonus of having that outline is it allows us to go a little bit even more transparent on the blue fill, which really helps in situations like these breadcrumbs where it's just behind plain link text, because we don't have to worry as much about having enough contrast there to where the text is still accessible and readable. We're still kind of working out some things with the implementation. So if you look at the input groups, where it's the input field combined with the button on the kind of middle there, having the focus state always be on top of each part of the component. So we're still working out stuff like that, but overall it is looking good, and I think should work out. So about it for focus state. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any questions for Michael? All right, next up is Mary.
Hey guys, let me share my screen. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about 2 components that I've been working on lately. So compound expansion and accordion. So I put together like a little, I guess you could call it an animation here of how it works in terms of interaction. But pretty much what the compound expansion does is that we have pretty much a basic or a hybrid list view, and we're talking about in the situation of the user clicking on one of the links here, so not expanding the whole item, but expanding out kind of details on just one link within it. So what happens here is that the user clicks on the link and just that section opens up. So it doesn't open up the full expanded list item. And again, there's a little video of it here working in context. Freezing on me. Okay, sorry about that. So then with accordion, this is based off of kind of the default state being this one right here. And that is based off of a basic list view and has a similar interaction to vertical navigation. So in that the user hovers over the list item and it highlights, and I had it set so that the caret would point down to show that an expansion could happen when clicked. And then when the user does click, it expands out. I know that with this GitHub issue, there is also, they're looking for a design for having a fixed height accordion as well. So not having this content section be fluid and having it cut off and have to scroll within the accordion to see the rest of the content. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but this is where I'm at so far. And I think that that's all I've got on my end. If anyone has questions, like I attached the GitHub issues here and I can send the slides to whoever wants to see them. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. And we're going to move over to CSS, and Christy will kick us off there.
Cool. Hey guys, so this sprint, I worked on the sequence and label components in HTML and CSS. So you probably remember when Kyle demonstrated his visual designs for the wizard a few weeks ago. So this is a sequence that fits inside of that wizard, and it can probably be used for other components too. Basically, it works in light and dark mode. This is how, when there's a small number of steps, or the browser can fit all of those steps, this is how the steps are placed within the sequence. So they're centered like that. Click through like that. And then when there's a larger number of steps, or the browser can't fit them all, these control arrows pop up like this. So obviously this isn't built in React yet, so the buttons, both of these buttons wouldn't be here. But imagine that this left button isn't here and the step one is to the left. This right arrow would pop up to indicate that we have more steps to the right that the user can click through. So button isn't functionable right now, but we also have the option to scroll. And so say I'm at step 5, it's the final step, this control arrow would disappear and the left one would pop up, indicating that I have steps back to at the start. So that is the sequence, and like this is our current focus and active styles. And then for the label component, basically we have one default label that we'll be using. And then this is an example of a modified label. So for example, in tables, most of the default tables have a lot of similar font sizes. And so we use the default label for that. And then if we looked for like a compact table, for example, that uses a modifier class to change the font size. So we also need to use the modifier class on our label to make sure it fits nicely in there. Otherwise, if we use the default label, it would look too big. And then as we get different use cases for how labels can be used, we can add modifier classes on there. So that is label and sequence.
Are there any questions for Christy? All right, and next we have Guillaume with the switch component.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Screen? Okay. Yeah, great. So for the people who don't know me, I'm working at Red Hat, but Andres invited me to work on the switch component. And thanks to the work from a lot of people, Mary, Michael, Matt, Jen, and I probably forgot a lot, we have pushed the switch component on the PatternFly Next repo. And so there is the switch working thanks to the input, hidden input, and the label attached to the input. We can have a working switch even without any JavaScript. And so there's the switch with two labels, one label on the left and one label on the right. We have the switch no label. So for Dana, this is the no label API I'm using in PatternFly React. And so this is probably be used in a table or something where we don't have a lot of space to put the two label. And this is the switch disable. So we don't have the focus switch, but I see the work from Michael, so I will probably improve the PatternFly Next switch component soon. And I'm working on the PatternFly React implementation to do this. I don't know if you see, but we have one label only on the right And depending on the state of the switch, we are displaying one label or another label. And that's it for me. If you have some question.
Are there any questions? All right, thanks for sharing. And next is React. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so this sprint I worked on the login box, which just contains a login box header, a body, and a footer. It's pretty simple. And underneath is the code example, and then we have the different props for each component of the login box, which just contains the children and the class names. And are there any questions? All right. And next for React, we have Dan with the login layout.
All right. Yeah, so for this sprint, I created the login layout. Basically mimics what we have in PatternFly core. There are a few pieces to it. The main component is login. There's login footer, login header, and a login header brand. So you can kind of see how that's put together up here in the example. Pretty simple, not a lot to it. I don't know if anybody has any questions to that, but that's about it.
All right, thanks, Dan. And next we have Joachim with the text component and React doc improvements.
Yep, hi. So, all right, so first up, actually, Don added the demo section to our React documentation. So now if you go to, I guess our official site, PatternFly React search.sh, and you scroll all the way to the bottom, now you should see our demos, and the first demo that was added was for the page layout. And then a new component that was added this sprint was the text component, which basically pulls in the styles from the core content component, except it has been reactified, which means that we've split it out into several subcomponents. So you've got your text content container. Within it, you can place text components or text list components. And if you use a text list component within it, you would find text list item components. If you use a text component, you specify what kind of component it is, whether it's an H1 header, H2, etc., a P, a link, a small block, quote, or pre. Let me actually zoom in a little bit. And if you use a text list component, then you specify whether it's an unordered list, ordered list, or data list. Here's some examples. So at the top, we've got various headers. You can see you just use up the text component and pass in what kind of, what type it is. So you've got your headers, your body, examples here, unordered list, ordered list, and here's a data list. The main advantage why it's good to split it up into subcomponents in React is because if you were to use another component within it, for example, let me actually add a live. So if I add this alert component within it, even though the fourth level text uses an H4 header and the success alert title uses an H4 header, they don't override each other. So that's why we did the splitting up. And then lastly, while I'm here, there were some improvements to the React documentation. So now you'll see this button to toggle the code. You can also copy the code, and here's a link to GitHub. So if you press that, it shows you the code in the context of our GitHub repo. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah, the doc improvements look really good. So thanks, Joachim. And next we have Richard, who's not able to join us today. He's going to be, well, Corell's going to cover on his behalf, but he's been working on the forms and checkbox improvements.
Yeah, hey guys. So Ricard was working on improving checkbox, where he added a label the checkbox. So when you click on it, you'll toggle it.
Are you sharing your screen? Can't see anything.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, Richard added the label component to checkbox. So when you click on the label, the checkbox gets toggled. Another good thing is that you don't have to only pass a string into it. You can pass any React component. For instance, badge over here. There's classic just the props. Another component he was working on was form component. The form component consists of the entire form, form group, which is label, and component, which is form component, like the actual input or something like that, and action at the bottom. So let me show you the HTML example. The form component, form group looks like this. We specify the label if it's required and such. Then you use the actual component, and button you can see that how the action group is used. Again, you don't have to use the toolbar here. You can use any layout you want, and yeah, that's right about it. Any questions?
Awesome. Thanks for covering for Richard. And next is Don with the toolbar demo.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I worked on a toolbar demo this sprint. It basically shows you how to take a layout and how to take the toolbar layout and lay out components within it. There's demos that I would like to use these. It shows you that with the drop down, that the items come down, and the same with the kebab. We added this, the codes in line. You can toggle it on and off, as Joachim showed earlier. And for the complex example, it also shows how to add a section. This is pretty much what was in line with PF Next. Other than that, it needs some styling updates, but was working with Joachim to try to get those in because it was not showing the code during when you turn the live demo off. So that's the one part that's still remaining. And then there's also an open issue to eventually add a filter here when we get that component. And that's about it. Any questions?
All right, and that's it for React. If you guys look at the agenda, underneath we have a section for recently merged PRs that were demoed previously. So for core, you guys can go and check out some of the PRs that have been merged and that are open now. And also for React, some of the components that were demoed last time that are merged now. So that is it for today. I will be sending out a recording shortly. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.